ਮਿੱਤਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵੇੜੇ ਚਮਕੀਲਾ ਖੜਕੂ ਨੀ ਅੱਜ ਮਿੱਤਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵੇੜੇ ਸ਼ਰਮੀਲਾ ਖੜਕੂ ਅੱਜ ਮਿੱਤਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵੇੜੇ ਚਮਕੀਲਾ ਖੜਕੂ
It's Thursday night and Gurinder Singh is getting ready for his Bhangra rehearsal.
I was 13 years old when I came to UK. I came in 2007. I moved here. It was a completely different lifestyle. Completely changed my life. New town.
The journey from India to Gravesend has been repeated for generations. In the 1950s, Britain's economy was booming and there was a shortage of cheap, unskilled labour. Men from the Commonwealth were invited to take up the vacant jobs, and many Sikh men from districts in the Punjab travelled here to Gravesend.
I expect one of the main attractions for Gravesend was the job opportunities here. Within Gravesend, the Imperial Paper Mills was quite a big employer. The cement works in Swanscombe, Tilbury docks across the road, and lots of other pockets of smaller industry within the Gravesend area.
Many of the new arrivals to this thriving town were young men who'd never left their homes or their families before.
That's how I was in 1957 when I first come to England. I was 16 years old. That's how I am today, 75 years age.
Life in the rural Punjab was very different to life in a town like Gravesend.
I was living in a combined family with my father and 3 uncles and my granddad and my grandma. We were very happy there. My village was called Pasla. Most people living in the village is maybe 90% farmers. Everybody was dependent on the farm. There wasn't many other jobs.
Back in India, I was very poor in those times, and people used to come here to have a better life in England.
The newcomers to Gravesend brought with them a different culture, custom, language, religion, and of course food. But not everyone was keen to embrace the new sights, sounds and smells in the town.
In those days, they used to be doing like the curry. When we used to cook the curry, they usually say, "Oh, it's a curry smell here." We don't like them people. But it's all changed now. It's the other way around. It's English people like the curry now, and our children don't like the curry altogether.
With a growing economy, work was plentiful. But just how long did it take to find a job?
It took me about 3 days to find a job. First job was working for Kalpan outside in the building site. Didn't like it very much. I was digging down and all sorts of work I used to do.
But it wasn't all work and no play.
There wasn't very much fun in Gravesend that time. I come from work to home, get ready, go to the bar, drink a couple of pints. That's all.
The original plan for many of the men was to support themselves, send money back home to their relatives and ultimately return to India. But Gravesend was beginning to feel like home, and the only thing missing was their families.
When I first came to England in 1963, I was 9 years old. So I would have been exactly the same age as my older granddaughter, Alina. This is my younger granddaughter, Jaya, and she's 5 years old.
Ajmail Singh Burra was just 3 years old when his father left for England, and it was 6 long years until the family were reunited in Gravesend.
Gravesend became an adopted village, and I have very fond memories of growing up as a young lad in Gravesend. We were the first Indian children at the school, unable to speak, write or read any English. I remember children from the school coming after school to our house, knocking on the door and asking us to play. I mean, it was just like that. I mean, although we couldn't speak English at that time, but it was nice to interact.
Ajmail's father, Mohan Singh Burra, initially worked as a general labourer before eventually running his own business.
The pub that Dad ran in the Gravesend town centre was called the Town Arms. A lot of locals frequent the pub, and say on a Saturday night, you might have a big group of Irish lads drinking on one side, and then the locals on the other bar, some playing maybe darts or listening to the jukebox.
And this is the Town Arms today. The pub is now Blake's, one of Kent's leading nightclubs. It's still in the family and run by Ajmel's nephew and Mohan's grandson, Blake.
Extremely proud of my granddad. Yeah, he was he was a pillar in our family, as well as one of the pillars in the Asian community here.
In 1962, new immigration controls were about to be introduced by the Conservative government, and the rush was on for people to come and join their families before the restrictions were introduced. For wives and mothers arriving in England, this new life in a new land could be particularly challenging. Many women arriving couldn't speak English, and with the men at work all day, they could only socialise among themselves. Carol Gossel works for a mental health charity in Gravesend. She moved to the town as a young child and, like many other Indian children at the time, was learning English at school, and that proved to be a useful skill.
I can recall from the age of really 5, I would imagine, being almost like a translator. And yeah, it was things like, GP appointments, or even though I was so young, for me it was quite, I'm going out to help somebody, or, I wasn't realising I was actually helping someone, but by them actually taking me along. And then they'd talk to me in Punjabi, and I would ask me to say this to the doctor.
It didn't take long for the Sikh community to settle and call Gravesend home, but the late 70s and early 80s were to bring a new set of challenges.
We are now telling the politicians of this country today that we cannot and will not absorb any more Asians.
The Sikh population in Gravesend was at an all-time high and had attracted the attention of the National Front.
They were sort of printing the literature, giving it to the houses, distributing the houses to say, we don't want the black community, we don't want people here, they're taking our jobs, they take our housing. The myth which they spread in order to spread sort of a hatred. They were doing, people coming late from work, they were throwing eggs at them, they were abusing, calling names.
That was bad and that was frightening, and we used to be careful when we go out.
This was a tough time to be British and Asian. Just 35 miles away in Southall, racial tensions had reached fever pitch. Many feared what happened there could soon be happening on the streets of Gravesend.
Gravesend would hardly seem to be another budding Southall, but over the last 20 years or so, something like 5,000 to 6,000 Asian immigrants have moved into the area. With unemployment at 15%, racial attacks have been on the increase in recent years.
But the people of Gravesend were determined to support each other.
And there were a lot of Sikhs got together, along with some of the host community who also fought with us shoulder to shoulder to show unity, that we do not want any fascism or racism in this town. We are proud of Gravesend.
The tension eventually subsided and life soon returned to normal for the Sikhs. Many set up their own businesses, and specialist Indian shops are now commonplace. And Makhan Singh even became the town's first Sikh mayor in 1997. But the crowning glory for the Sikh community came in 2010 when they opened their new place of worship, the Guru Nanak Darbar Gurdwara. The Gravesend Gurdwara is one of the largest outside India. It took 8 years to build at a cost of £12 million, raised almost entirely from donations. It's a sure sign the Sikhs are here to stay. Immigration is undoubtedly the hot topic at present. So how does the now well-established Sikh community feel about the current climate. I went to meet Govinda Sunda, who runs the Gravesend-based Kent Equality Cohesion Council.
So if you look at Gravesham, in terms of the minority ethnic population, it's just under 20%, so the largest in Kent.
How would you assess the situation here now? Is there much racial tension?
I mean, it's much less than when I was growing up, be much less than when, for example, my parents or the early migrants come. So in terms of community relations, although on the whole I would say they're very positive, but it'd be wrong to say there's been no issues whatsoever. So you will find that there are from time to time isolated incidents that will take place. Now obviously a lot of the new migration is from the EU, and you tend to find a lot of the landlords are members from the Sikh community. So whereas when they would have come in the 50s and 60s, they would have been living in rented accommodation. Now they've come the landlords of the new migrants who've arrived.
It's over 60 years since the first migrants came to the town. Young Sikhs like Gurinder are still choosing to call Gravesend home.